Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Two Rivers Tuesday. I'm your host, Maggie Colella, here with John Teague. How are you, John?
I'm doing well, Maggie. I feel like we should probably say right out of the gate that this podcast is going to be a little bit different. Just as last week's podcast was, there was no video last week. There's no video this week. And this week it might even sound a little different because we're having to use some different equipment, things that are simple and easy to use because Jesse's not here to help us.
We're helpless.
Yes, we are we are technically challenged.
Yes.
And so we're doing our best and hope that everyone will be able to hear this. Jesse is at home. He's not well. His whole family's been battling that awful bug that's going around. And so we're hoping that by the time he hears this, he's feeling better and that
Yes.
everyone's getting better. And if you're out there and you've been under the weather, gosh, I'm so sorry. It's going around.
Mm-hmm.
And prayers for the Lord to sustain you and to strengthen you to fight this thing off. And maybe in the forced rest or the forced slowness, may he speak to you and you hear his voice. Yeah.
That's good. This feels a little dangerous because the big podcast mic and the camera and all that is like one big reminder that people are going to hear what we say.
Yes.
But it's like, it feels like there's just like nothing.
I know. We are recording,
Yes.
so we are on the record.
Yes. All right. Hey, let's talk about the prayer watch a little bit. So we did that this past weekend. If anyone didn't know what that was, just explain a little bit what happened.
Yeah, so we did 48 hours of continuous prayer, and we did that by inviting everyone to sign up for 30-minute slots. And we called it a prayer watch, and that comes right out of Isaiah, where God puts watchmen on the wall. And their job is to give him no rest, to continue crying out, to be watching on the wall until Jerusalem sees victory. I think it's said much more poetic than that, but I don't have it right in front of me. It's more beautiful than that. But until God's people are restored, until God's people see him move. And so that's what we want. And so this whole month we've just been talking about being on the wall, getting on the wall and praying for our hearts, for our families, for our church, for God's kingdom to come and his will to be done. And so everybody signed up for 48 straight hours. We prayed, and I was so encouraged just scrolling down through the names, praying through those, and knowing that what was so fun, and I meant to say this maybe on Sunday, maybe I did, but what was so fun is that throughout those 48 hours, I would occasionally, like Katie and I were in the car, we had to go do something, and I was like, hey, who's praying right now? There were several times where I'd just be like, who's praying right now? And I'd go to the list, I'd see who it is, I'd pray for them, and just like know that they're praying right now. And so that was super fun.
Yeah. I thought it was really encouraging. On Sunday, you had people share like a little bit about what maybe they heard or their experience of it. And I feel like one theme that I've heard from people on Sunday and then just like talking to people was that originally the 30-minute slot felt like intimidating or felt like, okay, like I gotta like gear myself up for this. And I just think it was sweet that everyone was like, it went by so fast.
Yeah.
And I just think it goes to show like how much more for me, one of my takeaways was like, I could be doing this so much more. Like I could be like really spending like significant portions of time in prayer and kind of just like continue that habit or like do that more often, because 30 minutes to me was like, okay, whoa. But then I was like, it went by really fast. And so I just think that was encouraging. Hopefully that was a lot of people's experience of just like, they got to taste what it was like to spend an extended amount of time in prayer, and hopefully they want more of that, and that leaves them knowing they can do that more often.
And especially when you start to factor in and build in just time to listen and rest and breathe and be okay in the silence. I think we perhaps have been taught, or just we slip into the thinking that prayer is just us talking and like just downloading our list of needs to God. Or even like maybe we think, we need to start with like praise, and so I need to come up with all kinds of flowery words to praise his name. And I love that, actually. Do that, but it's not all talking.
Yeah.
Let the Lord speak. Let him be with you in the silence. That's another thing that I think I'm trying to learn, is to slow down enough to enjoy being with God as I pray, and not just like accomplish what I'm there to do, which is I'm here to pray.
Yeah.
Like, I'm here to check this box. Like, I'm here to do this thing. And then I like miss the fact that we're doing this thing together.
Yes.
So
Yeah. I feel like that's true of like, think of any meaningful relationship you have with someone, like the people that we're closest to, we can easily be in silence with them, and just their like presence with us is like comforting and strengthening and like restful. And so I agree, like I want to practice that with the Lord more often. Like he is always with me, but just those moments of like being at rest in the awareness of like his withness, that like he's with me, he's there, and like neither of us have to be like working or like talking, or it can just be together. So that I think overall super encouraged. The other thing that was I think helpful was just knowing that other people were doing this too, and even that is something that can be continued.
Yes.
Like it was so cool just to know like people have been praying before me and would be praying after me, and I enjoyed looking like who's coming up next. And but what if like even that culture continued of like we just had this culture of like we are a church that is always praying, and so we can always be motivated by and like encouraged by the reality that other people are always praying.
Yeah. Yes. And let me just invite feedback. I want to hear what the Lord has been saying to you, and what he showed you, and where he led you as you were praying on the wall during that 48-hour watch, or just maybe in this season as you've kind of been on the wall for your family and for our church or for your life group or whatever it may be. I want to hear about it. Like folks who have my phone number have been texting me these things. You can email me these things. Like it's just jon@2rc.org. It's on the website. I want to hear. Like it's encouraging, and you would be, I think, pleasantly like amazed that there are common themes. The way the Lord's speaking to different people in different places.
Yes.
It's pretty neat.
Yeah, and there's something so powerful in like processing and verbalizing what the Lord is doing in your heart. Like when you take the time to like officially tell someone, I feel like that does a work of just sealing that in your heart and in your mind. So I think there's a power in just sharing it. All right, let's talk about the men's event coming up. Tell us about that.
Yeah, on Thursday night, February 20th, we're having a men's dinner. It's called Bros and Barbecue because it's for the bros, and we're going to have barbecue there.
Yeah.
And it's going to be at Johnston Woods, which is a cool place. And it's not that far from here, but it's kind of out in the woods. And we're going to hang out. We're going to give away some fun stuff. And we're going to hear a little bit about how God can change a man's life. And from a man who's had his life changed. And then we're going to share a little bit about something we're excited about that's coming up, and a way for the men to stay connected in that.
That's awesome. Who should come to this? Like, is this appropriate for neighbors and friends?
Totally.
Great.
Yes. Yep. If they like barbecue.
Awesome.
Yes.
All right. So men, be there. Invite your friends, invite your neighbors, invite whoever.
Yeah. Even if they don't like barbecue. If they like banana pudding.
Ooh.
Even if you don't like banana pudding. Maybe you just like slaw.
I
Are
hope
you a
somebody.
slaw fan?
Yeah, well, on certain foods.
Okay.
Like hot dogs.
You like slaw on a hot dog?
Yes.
Interesting.
Ketchup and slaw.
Okay.
And on hamburgers.
Hamburgers. Slaw on a hamburger?
Absolutely.
That's weird.
What do you put it on?
I would put it on a barbecue sandwich.
Oh.
Otherwise, I don't know that I put it on anything.
Interesting.
I guess it would. Okay, we digress.
It needs to be finely shaven. That's my last point about slaw.
Finely shaven. Okay. Yeah. This is not good podcast. Father.
All right. Are you ready to talk about Sunday sermon?
Well, yeah, we should do that.
All right. So you kind of went off course a smidge, but it's all still related. But we kind of dove off from the Lord's Prayer and wanted to talk about Isaiah 55. And so tell us a little bit about the context of Isaiah 55, what's going on in those passages.
Isaiah 55 begins with this incredible invitation to us, to God's people. It kind of comes after the suffering servant song of Isaiah 53. And we may know that passage, maybe we've heard it before. All we like sheep have gone astray. We've turned to our own way, and so the Lord has put all of our iniquities on this suffering servant, who is our King Jesus. And so because of what he's done, you sort of turn the page in Isaiah 54, and you see these pictures, these metaphors of just power, of how God redeems what is most fractured and broken, brings life out of barren places, and these beautiful metaphors in chapter 54, and then the invitation. So come to me, and then a really important question that he asks along the way, which is, why don't you?
Yeah. I feel like just taking time to fully embrace the context of where this is going is really helpful. We need to look at Jesus, look at this servant who's willing to suffer, and then look at what is possible because of what he accomplished, and then this beautiful invitation to come to me, and then the hard question. But I think so often we just hear the hard question and misinterpret it if it's not interpreted in light of all that is coming before that question.
That's good.
So I think it's really important, just as you listen to this and as you're thinking through these hard questions, if there's even an ounce of shame or condemnation or anything in you causing you to almost withdraw from these hard questions, or fear who's asking these questions, then take more time to review the context of where this question is coming from, of who it's coming from, because I think it's only when we hear this question out of the true heart of God are we able to feel safe enough to do the work of answering these questions.
Yes.
So let's talk about God's compassion. We know that that is where this question is coming from, and so let's kind of unpack, what is God's compassion? What does that mean?
Yeah, well, so you're asking that question because I asked us on Sunday, what's the tone we hear God speaking in? So let me just read this real quick. This is Isaiah 55, verse 1. Come, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters, and he who has no money, come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without price. That's the beautiful, generous invitation. That's the offer. And then the question in verse 2, why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy? Why do you do that? And if we're not careful, as you were saying, if we hear this the wrong way, we're just going to assume something wrong of God.
Yeah.
And I tried to give us a couple of options, that maybe we hear God in anger, he's just, what the heck are you doing? Maybe we hear him in an annoyed tone, it's just gosh, again, you're doing this again, kind of just exasperated. And if you're a parent, you can relate to this. And then I said, or it could be compassion. And here's where I get that. Because in the previous chapter, in verse 8, God says, with everlasting love, I will have compassion on you, says the Lord, your Redeemer. And then in verse 10, My steadfast love shall not depart from you, and my covenant of peace shall not be removed, says the Lord, who has compassion on you. So we need to hear this invitation and then this question, which he knows is really the key to whether or not we're actually going to come to him or not. It's being asked with compassion. Elsewhere in the Bible, God tells us that he's gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and abounding in love. It's his compassion that moves him to rescue us, right? It's his compassion that leads him to forgive us and restore us. He doesn't have to do that. He does that because of his compassion, because of who he is, because of the fact that he feels somehow, and even in we don't even fully understand, because we can only understand human feelings, right. But he gave them to us, and he reveals these words that seem like they're feeling words to help us understand him. He feels deeply when we are broken and wandering and lost and we're mired in our sin and we're chasing after things. He feels that, like there's a better way, and he knows what that's doing to us. So it's his compassion, his gentleness, his care, his kindness. Am I getting anywhere close to your question?
Yes, no, that helps a lot. I feel like I say this often, but I just think it's so hard for me to grasp that God is not like me. And so because I lack so much compassion and with my children am quick to be like angry, annoyed, disappointed, frustrated, like I just assume God must treat me like that too. And so I just think it's so important for me to just like receive and just like wash over myself the truth often that like God is not like me, and that is good news. Because the way that I would respond to me is not how God responds to me. But that's really hard to believe because I know me. But so I think it's just important that we just like remind ourselves constantly of the character of God and try to work that truth into our heart. And try to receive it and try to believe it, because it's his kindness that leads us to repentance.
Yes.
Because like, so in this sermon and like as I've been processing these things, I'm just like, I want to change. I want to turn around and like walk a new way, which is what repentance is. But it is only his kindness that will enable me to do that. Where I think so often I believe the lie that like shame will motivate change in me. And I actually will like tell this to my husband in my parenting. I'm like, I just really, because I feel so convinced that shame motivates change, I think that will work with my kids too. And so I think that that's how God wants to like change me, is by like being angry or being disappointed, and like that is what will motivate change. And that's just not true. That's not how it works, but it's so hard for me to believe. But so just remembering the only way we will turn and walk in a new way is God's kindness. Like that is what will lead us to change in our hearts. So let's talk a little bit about this question that he asks out of his heart of compassion and gentleness and care, which is, why do you spend your money on things that are not bread, and why do you labor for that which doesn't satisfy? And so you talked on Sunday that like he knows the answer. He sees our hearts. He probably sees it even more clearly than we do. But let's talk a little bit about what some of these things might be. What are some of the places that we labor for that don't satisfy us, and what are some of the things we spend our money on that are not bread?
Why? What is it? Well, I said a few of them that I always start with me whenever, I'm thinking about this. I have to. The first thing that came to me was, why do you spend your free time at the end of the day scrolling on your phone?
Yeah.
That's for me one of those things. And, I preached this on Sunday, and I caught myself one night. It was either Sunday night or Monday night this week. I caught myself like just sort of like out of total muscle memory about to do it again. And I was like, what am I doing? I don't need this.
Yes.
You know, like I can do something else. Like I could just lay here and pray before, and kind of review my day and just thank God for it before I head off to sleep, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think, like, because we are all, for the most part, addicted to our phones.
Yes.
Like, what do you think it is that we're after when we turn to that?
Gosh, if I knew that, I could be a millionaire.
Yeah.
A millionaire. As if like that sounds like 7-year-old John right there. Like when $1 million
Oh,
is a lot.
$100.
$1 million is a lot, and
Yes.
I've been praying for $1 million for our church. But gosh, if I knew that answer, what are we looking for? Gosh, it's like here's what's so maybe. Here's one thought. I don't even know if we even are looking for anything except like these little hits. That it's like so much more ingrained in, like, has something to do with our brain science than we even realize.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of studies about that and about dopamine and how it kind of gets shot into our bodies and our minds when we're looking at our phones.
Yeah.
You know, and like, I don't know what it is. Like our thirst for, like, I don't even know what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's different for everybody, and it's different depending on like the moment. So I think a lot of times we just go to it out of sheer habit, like muscle memory. Like it's just what we've ingrained in our brains to do. So we just resort to that because oftentimes that's easier than like having to make a new decision about how I'll spend this time. Because if I just always make the same decision of I'm going to get out my phone, that's just like easy. That takes no work. But if I choose not to do it, then I have to figure out, well, what am I going to do with this moment? And that's a little harder. So I think it's easier to just default to that. And then I think we like think that something else would be boring. Like, I just think we are just so, and I am so ingrained to like avoid boredom, and that's not good for me. But oftentimes I think, well, spending this moment or this downtime any other way would just kind of be boring. So I'm going to choose this. And I think a lot of times we miss out on so much because we are afraid of being bored. So I think that's some of what's underneath that. But I think this is an important question for everyone to ask themselves of just like, why do I do that? What am I trying to get when I do that? And what might I be missing out on when that's my default?
Yeah, I just want to add real quickly to this one that we might be running from what immediately comes into our minds when we like stop for a second.
Yes.
You know, like we don't want that.
Yes.
We don't want to go there. And if we can keep our minds engaged on these headlines or these pictures and other people's lives or whatever it is, or someone telling me about this next great thing that's going to like bring salvation to my life, you know, it's going to make my life easier, better, whatever, then I can just go there and not have to deal with whatever's going on. And I say that with compassion because I get that. And that's how, and here's the thing, that keeps you from coming to the Lord with those things. It may be that you need to let those thoughts come in so that you can deal with them, take them to the Lord, bring them to Him.
And sometimes that is like painful work, but the alternative is that just stays in there and it's going to come out one way or another. So that something along those lines happened to me recently where I was like trying to like sit in some silence and just pray, and something like icky like came up in my like heart and soul and mind, and it was just like, what is this? I need to like identify what this feeling is, and like I need to do the work of like figuring out what is going on with this. But everything in me was like, get your phone out. Like, do not
get out of here.
Yes. And so I just think like we have a choice in those moments of like, do I want to do the hard work with the Lord of like figuring out what in the world this is, or do I just want to like medicate and get my phone out and like ignore what's going on in my heart? And so that's hard.
Here's another one. I think that we run to critical thoughts, criticism, thinking that that's going to get us something that we want or make us feel better.
Yeah.
And I think related to that, but maybe somewhat different, is just complaining. Complaining can be like real habitual and can become like real low-hanging fruit in conversation, just to like figure out how to like, I don't know, not even figure out, just like poke holes at things or just complain about something that happened, and because that's just like easy and top of mind, and it doesn't really give us anything.
Yeah.
It's like empty calories.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like it's so much harder to take personal responsibility. Like, it's easy to point at others and critique others, but the alternative is like, well, if this is something I dislike or like a weakness I see, I can take responsibility to be part of the solution of bringing health to this, or I can just poke holes at it.
Yeah.
And it's easier to poke holes. You don't have to own it. But if you own it and take responsibility and be part of the solution, there's actually so much joy on the other side of that, but it's harder.
Yeah. And you just miss out on just the joy that comes with gratitude.
Yes.
Like, because you're thinking about like what didn't go well or what was wrong, instead of like whatever blessing it may bring, or or what you long for, or what the potential that it could have, or whatever that may be.
Yes, yeah. And I'm not a brain scientist, but I do think that like we create like ruts in our brain of complaint or ruts in our brain of thankfulness.
Yes.
And like those two paths, like one leads to life and one leads to death. And so when we choose to like get out of the rut of complaint and criticism and offense and just focus our eyes on thankfulness and gratitude and like seeing the good, I genuinely believe like that is a huge part of transforming us and renewing our mind, and like our brain changes.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And I'm not a brain scientist either, but
we should be.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I want to say this. We can ask God to do that.
Yes.
We can invite him to do that. I was listening to a podcast recently where someone who was being interviewed said, you can actually just pray and ask God to rewire your brain. Like, why wouldn't you do that? Because that's part of it, right? I think that we think we got to do the work and then come to God and be like, look, God, like, I'm not complaining as much anymore. Like, I've been working on it. Like, I think there is work to be done, but Paul said that in Philippians. He's like, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. But then he said, because it is God who is working in you.
Yeah.
And so we need to go to God and say, God, I know that this is a struggle for me, and I go here thinking it's going to give me something, but it doesn't really. I'm settling for what it gives me. And I need you to, like, this is like a rut I'm in. I need you to rewire my brain. I need you to get me out of this rut and put me back up on the ground and help me as so would you give me eyes to see like the good?
Yes. Yeah.
That's how you pray for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I just think that we might just think, oh, I gotta do better.
Yeah. And that works temporarily, but not long term.
It's not sustainable.
Yes.
You need the grace and power of God.
Yeah. That what you're describing reminds me of the like picture of how God can like take a city that is just like ashes, and he can like restore it and rebuild it. So we can even think of like our minds as like, there's parts of my brain that are like ashes right now, and I need the Lord to like rebuild that city and restore that city, and he can. And that's the beauty of like believing and trusting and having faith. Like, he longs to do that in our minds and in our hearts.
Yes.
This last one I want to talk about too. Why do you put up defenses against deep friendships and intimacy? Am I mistaken that this might just maybe be more of like a man thing? Or no?
I don't know, because I'm not a woman, so I don't know if this is not but I can definitely say that that some men do kind of build up defenses against this because I think that when I say deep friendship, another word might be intimate and close. And I know like that feels like a word that's like reserved for the bedroom or something like that, but it's not. It's talking about closeness, and that requires vulnerability.
Yeah.
And that means like being seen with all your warts and weaknesses, and that is difficult for men. And so I do think we kind of defend ourselves away from. We sort of like a sort of a camaraderie and a common goal, you know, that we can work toward, or a common experience. We like to share those things together, but as it gets deeper and we become more known, like we're more, you know, like the defenses are stronger as it gets closer to the core of who we are.
Yeah. So if someone is out there and they're like, this feels scary to me to have a deep friendship, or like maybe I don't even know how to do that, how can they identify what might be underneath that, and then how can they take steps to like letting that defense down?
Well, I think that a good place to start is with the Lord. And I'm trying not to give a churchy answer, but the Lord loves us and knows us completely, and he does not reject us. And so by understanding and leaning into that and truly believing and trusting that then gives you a real sense of peace and security that even if I'm rejected by someone else, like he will never reject me. And I think that can produce in us a real courage to then be known by others.
Yeah, even if they see your weakness, it's like, okay, God sees and knows my weaknesses, and I'm safe with him. Therefore, that frees me to be seen fully, weaknesses and all, by others.
Yeah, and I think that courage leads to more courage. Courage is contagious. And so when you're courageous enough to say, can I share something with you? That like unlocks a door.
Yes.
Right there.
Yeah.
To the defense, you know, like into the castle, you know, the drawbridge comes down.
Yes. All right. So in closing, I think that these questions, we all have to kind of do this work in our heart, and it's hard work, but just begin now and over the next couple of days to remind yourself of the character of God, his compassion for you, and then start asking yourself, like, what are those things that I spend my money on? What are those things that I labor for? And then ask the even harder question of, why do I do that? And I just encourage you to dig deeply into your heart, and then invite the Holy Spirit into that, and listen to what he might reveal to you, and know that like you're safe in his care, that he's not going to reveal to you like something and then just leave you in that. Like he welcomes you, and he changes you, and he transforms you, and you're safe to ask these questions. And then just the ending encouragement, will you read that verse at the end of Isaiah 55? Seek the Lord while he may be found. That one.
Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. And then verse 7 says, let him return to the Lord, that he may have compassion on him, and to our God, for he will abundantly pardon.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just want you to hear that the Lord is wanting to draw us closer to him right now. I am convinced of this, and I could have said that any day of any year, right? The Lord wants to draw us close to him, but it just feels like right now in this season in the life of Two Rivers Church, he's doing something very specific.
Yeah.
And this question is a big part of it. Why? Why do we do this? Why do we run to these other things instead of coming to him where we can have whatever we need? And that's a big part of what I think is keeping us from enjoying all of the abundance of a relationship with Him.
Yeah, that's good. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and we will be back next week.
See ya.